When it comes to the security of the Arctic region, Europe is fully committed. And we share the objectives of the United States in this regard. For instance, our EU member, Finland, one of the newest NATO members, is selling its first icebreakers to the United States. And this shows that we have the capability right here in the ice, so to speak. It shows that our northern NATO members have Arctic-ready forces right now. And above all, that Arctic security can only be achieved together. And this is why the proposed additional tariffs are a mistake, especially between long-standing allies.
US President Donald Trump fires another warning shot at its NATO allies. If they move on trade, I'll meet it, he said, warning that it would ricochet back. This time, the trigger isn't China or Russia, it's Greenland, and a showdown unfolding as a world gathers in Davos. Speaking to News Nation, President Trump made clear the United States would match any European trade retaliation, move for move. If they do anything to us, he said, I'll meet it. Not a threat of escalation, Trump insisted, but a promise of symmetry. The warning landed before Trump arrived in Davos, the World Economic Forum, where allies, rivals, and dealmakers collide. But this year, Trump arrives with baggage. Over the weekend, he imposed 10% tariffs on Denmark and European partners, directly tied to resistance against US control of Greenland, and he has not ruled out military force. Europe has pushed back, publicly and usually bluntly. British Prime Minister Keir Starmer broke diplomatic convention, saying Greenland's future belongs only to its people and Denmark. France echoed that confusion. Trump himself shared a message from President Emmanuel Macron, I do not understand what you are doing on Greenland. Despite the tension, Trump struck an optimistic tone. He suggested a deal could be reached within days, possibly at Davos itself, one that leaves NATO satisfied and America satisfied. But behind the optimism sits a reality. Tariffs are already in place, trust is strained, and Europe is weighing retaliation. This is no longer just a trade dispute. It's a test of alliance boundaries, how far pressure can go before unity fractures. Greenland is the symbol, tariffs are the weapon, and Davos is now the arena where this standoff could either explode or reset.
So on Ukraine, we're a core member of the Coalition of the Willing and one of the largest per capita contributors to its defense and security. On Arctic sovereignty, we stand firmly with Greenland and Denmark and fully support their unique right to determine Greenland's future. Our commitment to NATO's Article 5 is unwavering. So we're working with our NATO allies, including the Nordic-Baltic Gate, to further secure the alliance's northern and western flanks, including through Canada's unprecedented investments in over-the-horizon radar, in submarines, in aircraft, and boots on the ground, boots on the ice. Canada strongly opposes tariffs over Greenland and calls for focused talks to achieve our shared objectives of security and prosperity in the Arctic.
We have to fix the war in Ukraine. We have to help the Ukrainians to resist and find a sustainable peace. We have to fix prosperity in democracies. I mean, it doesn't make sense to have tariffs and be divided, and even to threaten now with additional tariffs. We can use the crazy thing is that we can be put in a situation to use the anti-coercion mechanism for the very first time vis-à-vis the US if they put additional tariffs. Can you imagine that? This is crazy. I do regret that. But this is a consequence of just unpredictability and useless aggressivity. So what we have to do is to remain very calm, all of us. We have such an agenda with so many opportunities and so many challenges. So let's be focused on peace in Europe, everybody should be focused to help the Ukrainians to have a sustainable peace. Level playing field and fixing the issues and imbalances with China, because it's an issue for the Europeans and the Americans. And third, let's be focused on more competitiveness in Europe and this big acceleration, full stop.
That is why yesterday I spoke to President Trump, to European leaders, and to the Secretary General of NATO to find a solution rooted in partnership, facts, and mutual respect. Because that is how strong alliances protect shared interests. The same is true on other issues. Britain is a pragmatic country. We look for agreement. We believe in partnership. We prefer solutions to slogans. And we will not indulge in commentary and gesture politics that harm the British people. But being pragmatic does not mean being passive. And partnership does not mean abandoning principle. That is why it's important to be clear about who we stand with, what we stand for, and where our interests lie. Now, this is a moment for the whole country to pull together. So I warmly welcome the support we've had with regards to Greenland and the proposed tariffs from the leader of the opposition. I thank her for her support. And firstly, to underscore your point, this has been very badly received across the United Kingdom. We're allies of the United States, and we work closely with them, and therefore I'm not surprised by the reaction that's been across the United Kingdom, and it is a very serious situation. Our job is to ensure that we find a way forward consistent with our principles and our values and consistent with our national interest. And the US remains a close ally on defence, on security and on intelligence, on nuclear capability. We work very closely with the United States, and we must never lose sight of our national interest in that. But we must stand up for our values. We must be clear about the principles that we are applying here, and will continue to do so. What I'm going to do now is to focus on our national interest and be absolutely clear that that requires us to be clear about the principles that we apply to a situation like this, in particular that the future of Greenland is for Greenland and the Denmark Kingdom, and that tariffs should not be used against allies in this way. In relation to the escalation, look, a tariff war is in nobody's interests, and we have not got to that stage, and my focus, therefore, is making sure we don't get to that stage, and that's what I'm doing at the moment. I spoke to President Trump yesterday, as I think you all know, and I'll no doubt speak to him again in coming days. Continually, our offices talk all the time, but we must find a pragmatic, sensible, sustained way through this that avoids some of the consequences that will be very serious for our country. Firstly, I don't think it's right for us to choose between the US and Europe. That's not a new position today. That's the position I've consistently held, as have previous governments, because we are allies with our European partners and allies with the US. And the strength in being able to keep both those alliances has served us well over the last 80 years. So this is not a moment to sort of choose one between the other. I have argued, and this is not an argument for the first time today, and I've spoken to European allies and leaders about the need for Europe to step up and do more in its own defence and security. I feel that over many years we've not paid enough attention to what we European nations can and should do in our own defence, and this reinforces why it's important that we do that in defence and security. And defence and security these days, of course, includes energy and resilience and cyber, as well as the traditional defence and security. Europe has to step up into that space, and that's an argument I've been leading on and making for a number of months now with our European partners, and will continue to do so. That is one of the things I discussed with President Trump yesterday in relation to those forces which were clearly there to assess and work on risk from the Russians. And so there's real clarity, I hope, about that. In relation to the relationship, we must never lose sight of the fact that on defence, security, intelligence and nuclear capability, we work very closely with our US allies, and it's in our national interest to continue to do so. On the question of NATO, it is in all of our interest to make sure that NATO remains strong and stable. We had a very good NATO summit last year with more members than we've had before, with more unity than many people thought we would achieve. And NATO remains the single most effective and successful military alliance the world has ever known. And so it's in all of our interest to make sure that nothing is done to weaken NATO. Firstly, what I meant by the downward spiral is the potential for this to cause huge damage for the UK, whether that's in a trade war or the weakening of alliances. And I do not want to see that happen. That doesn't mean that we put to one side our principles and our values, quite the contrary. We're very clear about what they are, which is why I wanted to have this press conference this morning and to affirm those principles and values that we apply. In relation to the EU, look, firstly, we're coordinating very closely with the EU. I spoke to a number of EU leaders last night. I spoke to Ursula von der Leyen last night and intend to do so again either today or tomorrow, so that we're closely aligned. There's proper unity and coordination in our response. They will decide exactly what they will do next during the course of today and the coming days.